This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control. We're T-minus 1 hour, 22 minutes and counting. Cabin purge has now been completed and the boost protective cover has been closed. The 65% nitrogen, 35% oxygen mixture will now be enriched to a 60-40 mixture at liftoff. Just completed were some pre-flight command tests with the Manned Spacecraft Center in Houston. These tests are to ensure that Houston can send commands and that they are being received by the launch vehicle. Also just completed was a first motion signal. This is the first motion of the vehicle as it lifts off the pad. A test signal was sent to the Eastern Test Range and to the Manned Spacecraft Center in Houston to assure that they will get this signal at liftoff. Also, we just received a final go for the Gym Sphere release. The Gym Sphere is a weather balloon, which is the final weather balloon to go up before launch, indicating the wind direction. C-band beacons are in check at this time. The C-band beacons aboard the launch vehicle are used in tracking. They give indications of range, velocity during the powered phase of flight. Cue-ball sim command was just sent. The cue-ball is an angle of attack meter, which is perched above the launch escape system, and it's read by the spacecraft commander in the spacecraft. It would indicate any deviation from the planned flight route. It reads 0 as it sits on the pad, and during the test, a simulated command is sent to it, and Gene Cernan in the spacecraft reads off what he is reading in the spacecraft during that sim command. The checks in the spacecraft continue to run somewhat ahead of schedule. The spacecraft test conductor, Skip Chauvin, indicated they're running ahead and looking good, to which Cernan replied, "We're looking good up here too." The countdown continuing to move along well at this time. T-minus 1 hour, 21 minutes and counting. This is Kennedy Launch Control. This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control. We're T-minus 1 hour, 12 minutes and counting. At this time, Spacecraft Commander Gene Cernan and the spacecraft test conductor, Skip Chauvin, are going over some command checks. During these checks, the spacecraft commander actually gimbals swings the main engine in the service module. He does this using his flight hand controller, and this is a system which is done so that if there is a problem with a computer, which normally flies these, he could take over and manually fly it. Normally, however, all burns of this engine are done by the computer. Out at the pad, the space vehicle is surrounded by searchlights producing some 225 foot candles of light. A total of 72 20-kilowatt xenon lights and two 60-kilowatt xenon searchlight banks provide this illumination. At liftoff, approximately 7,500 foot candles will be produced from the flame of the Saturn V first-stage engines. This is almost equivalent to daylight. Searchlights will also illuminate the Apollo 17 for the first 60 feet of its flight. Our countdown continuing to go smoothly now as we approach the 1 hour mark. T-minus 1 hour, 11 minutes and counting. This is Kennedy Launch Control. Go ahead. This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control. We're T-minus 1 hour and counting. T-minus 1 hour and counting. Just completed were the C-band beacon checks. These are checks of the beacon, 2 of them aboard the instrument unit of the space vehicle. These are used in conjunction with a C-band radar here at Kennedy Space Center to check the space vehicle during the powered phase of flight. Check was just made with the Superintendent of Range Operations, who ran through the camera coverage, looking at the weather around the various areas to see what camera coverage, and that appears to be satisfactory. Meanwhile, at the pad, the closeout crew has completed securing the White Room area, and they are clearing the pad area themselves at this time. Just before they left, they indicated to Cernan they were completed their jobs going back away from the pad area. Cernan said, "We'll see you when we get back." The pad leader responded that the next face you see better be a frogman or you're in trouble. Weather appears to be satisfactory. We've been tracking some local buildups, but at this time they do not seem to be posing any problem for an on-time launch at 9:53 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now T-minus 59 minutes, 32 seconds and counting. This is Kennedy Launch Control. This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control. We're T-minus 55 minutes, 54 seconds and counting. Stoney, astronaut Bob Parker, the capsule communicator here in the firing room, who has a variety of functions during this mission, one of which is to set the elevators at the 320-foot level. He actually commands the elevators, which are part of the egress system, emergency egress system for the astronauts. He has just reported that the elevators have now been set at the 320-foot level. In an emergency, the crew could come out of their spacecraft, enter these elevators, where they would be lowered at a high speed, 600 feet per minute, to the ground floor or A-level floor, where they can exit from there into a variety of escape modes, one of which would be down a chute into a blast danger area or a safety area, or they could continue on out and be picked up by armored carriers. Under way at this time with the launch vehicle are some checks of the secure range safety systems aboard the vehicle. These are actually checks of the receivers in that system. A range safety officer could terminate the flight of Apollo 17 if it became erratic by initiating the emergency cutoff, or if necessary, a propellant dispersion command. These systems are located on each of the flight stages, or 3 stages of the Saturn V, 2 receivers in each stage, and they would receive a signal from the range safety officers, and then sending through these receivers, they could perform the propellant dispersion. These actions, of course, would be taken only if the vehicle were so erratic that it were endangering some land areas, and of course only after the crew had used one of the escape options open to them. Test going well at this time. Our countdown continuing. T-minus 54 minutes, 6 seconds and counting. This is Kennedy Launch Control. This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control, T-minus 50 minutes, 55 seconds and counting. Preparations are underway in the Launch Control Center at this time for a critical power transfer test. The space vehicle at this time is being fed from an external power source, but shortly before liftoff, it will be transferred to the internal flight batteries. This test is to ensure that all electrical systems aboard the vehicle function properly on the internal flight batteries. The test takes about 5 minutes, during which time the various elements of the launch team monitor their systems and report in then to the test supervisor, Bill Schick, here in the control room, that everything looks good during the test. Depending on local weather conditions in various areas around the United States, the flight of Apollo 17 will be monitored or be able to be seen by people as far as 500 miles away. This is the flight as seen of the first stage of powered flight. This would include a large portion of the southeastern United States, northern tip of Cuba, and the Bahama Islands. The power transfer test now underway. First stage, second stage, third stage, instrument unit now all going to internal power. Countdown continuing to go well. T-minus 49 minutes, 35 seconds and counting. This is Kennedy Test Control. This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control. We're now T-minus 45 minutes, 55 seconds and counting. various elements of the launch team, reporting into Test Supervisor Bill Schick that they experienced no problems during the power transfer. We've now transferred back again to an external power source, which will feed the vehicle systems until approximately 50 seconds before liftoff, at which time the final power transfer to internal takes place. At the T-minus 45-minute mark, we'll be watching for swing arm number 9. That's the swing arm that gives access to the spacecraft to swing back to a retract position 12 degrees back from the spacecraft. This is a park position, a standby position, where it will remain down till the final moments of the countdown. T-minus 5 minutes, it swings back to the full retract position. Once it swings back, the launch escape system aboard the top of the spacecraft can be armed, and this system could be used to pull the astronaut crew to safety in any disaster. Now, T-minus 44 minutes, 52 seconds and counting. This is Kennedy Launch Control. This is Apollo Saturn. This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control. We're T-minus 40 minutes, 51 seconds, and counting. Swing arm number 9 just retracted a few minutes ago. As it retracted, the astronaut crew aboard the space vehicle could feel it moving away from the spacecraft. Eugene Cernan, spacecraft commander, commented, "We're really hanging out here in the breeze now." Spacecraft test conductor, referring to the weather, indicated that that was just a small breeze. The launch escape system has been armed. This system now could be used to carry the astronauts to safety if necessary. It's also used during the initial phases of powered flight to carry the astronauts away in an emergency. It would fly away in a high arc, pulling them to a height enough so that their parachute system could deploy and they could make a normal landing. The system is about 33 feet long. The motor develops 147,000 pounds of thrust. This is almost twice the amount of thrust of the Redstone rocket, which powered astronaut Alan Shepard, America's first man into space. The countdown continuing to move along smoothly now, T-minus 39 minutes, 36 seconds and counting. This is Kennedy Launch Control. This Apollo Saturn launch control. We're T-minus 35 minutes, 11 seconds, and counting. Spacecraft Commander Gene Cernan just reported back to the spacecraft test conductor, Skip Chauvin. He said, "You've delivered us the best. Now it's our turn." Thank the guys. We want to see them as soon as we can when we get back, and I guarantee you we'll do that. Meanwhile, C-band beacon checks are going on with the space vehicle. The liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen fully aboard and being replenished at this time to ensure a full load at liftoff. Countdown continuing to go smoothly as we approach the half-hour mark. T-minus 34 minutes, 34 seconds, and counting. This is Kennedy Launch Control.
Okay, go span. Okay, I think you heard that. I'm going to punch up right now. God, I've never thought that this.
This Apollo Saturn launch control, T-minus 30 minutes, 54 seconds, and counting. Manned spacecraft just indicated to the test supervisor, Bill Schick, that we are go for the terminal countdown sequences. Final propulsion checks have been completed, and the C-band readouts, once again repeated, have been completed. Beach Boss reports the launch site recovery force helicopters are on station and ready. Digital range safety command checks are now underway as the countdown continues smoothly, aiming for the T-minus 30-minute mark. Now T-minus 30 minutes, 24 seconds and counting. This is Kennedy Launch Control.
Okay. Hey, all flight controllers. We're getting into the configuration for launches. All flight controllers, SSRs, back rooms, anybody who's got either display request or TV channel attached capability. I want you to select your launch phase displays now, and I don't want any changing except those displays that are mandatory and required by each console position. We've had some problems in the VSN, and I don't want to bomb that system out during the terminal count remaining or launch phase. And this is particularly true of those people that are going to be watching channel 77 for the TV picture of the launch. I don't want anybody reselecting that channel to watch the spacecraft being there. If you got it up for now, leave it up.
What are you going to do?
Huh? I ain't going to watch it. Right. Give me your channel, please. Fido, you want to give me your channel? Okay.
This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control, T-minus 25 minutes, 54 seconds and counting. Command Module pilot Ron Evans at this time has armed the reaction control system aboard the service module. He does this by allowing the hypergolic fuels to move down the lines to the engines. At this time, he's reading out the temperatures, pressures, and fuel quantities in that system. Our weather continues to look good. The major frontal area, which had been of some concern earlier, has remained well west of the launch area. Also, some smaller buildups, which we have been monitoring, do not appear to be coming close enough to cause any concern for our 9:53 p.m. launch time. That launch will be aiming Apollo 17 for the Taurus Littrow area of the moon. This area named after the Taurus Mountains, these in southern Turkey, and the Austrian astronomer Littrow. The site is expected to yield some of the oldest and some of the youngest lunar samples returned during the Apollo flights to the moon. Now, T-minus 24 minutes, 50 seconds and counting. This is Kennedy Launch Control. This Apollo Saturn Launch Control, T-minus 20 minutes, 55 seconds and counting. A short time from now, we'll begin chilling the propulsion systems aboard the second and third stage of the Saturn V vehicle. This is necessary to condition them for the flow of the super cold liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen. Just a few moments ago, the crew aboard Spacecraft America was given an updated weather forecast. Cernan reported, "I hope it's as beautiful out there as it is in here." Countdown continuing to move smoothly at T-minus 20 minutes, 24 seconds and counting. This is Kennedy Launch Control.
Oh, they don't know when it started. It's intermittent too. Sure. It's intermittent. It'll just crop up and all of a sudden somebody's going to be locked out. Package heaters on RCS. How you doing down there?
We probably got them all at the seat.
Yes. I was trying to scout. Go network. This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control.
T-minus 15 minutes, 52 seconds, and counting. The Vice President of the United States, Spiro Agnew, has entered the Launch Control Center now. He'll observe the final portions of the countdown from here and also the launch. Arming and checking of the service module reaction control system has now been completed, and in progress is the chill down of the S2 or second stage start tanks. Checkouts continuing to go well, some running a little bit ahead of schedule, all on time. T-minus 15 minutes, 20 seconds and counting. This is Kennedy Test Control.
Okay, work schedule over here. Got my schematics. Got my checklist. That work. Let's go. On 111. 10 minutes.
Yeah, side of defense you're on.
This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control, T-minus 10 minutes, 55 seconds, and counting. This time, some computer checks being run with the launch vehicle. The spacecraft has now gone to full internal power. Up to this point, the spacecraft fuel cells had been sharing the power load with an external source. Also going on at this time are some checks of the Astrocom circuit. This is the circuit which is used by the launch operations manager, spacecraft test conductor, Stoney, and the 3 astronauts at launch time. This to ensure that they are not getting any extraneous voices or having to listen to any of the other networks which might be carrying on conversations which they don't need at that time. Countdown proceeding smoothly, T-minus 10 minutes, 15 seconds and counting. This is Kennedy Launch Control.
Does that work? Okay, flare it up. Hold time is 8 minutes if I don't get this squared away. Okay, we got to get this squared away by 8 minutes because that's preferred hold time.
Mike, you've got to go on STC's comm flight.
STC Houston flight. Raj, we're going. STC Houston flight. We're happy with the voice checks. Go ahead, network. Roger. Okay.
This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control. T-minus 8 minutes and counting. T-minus 8 minutes and counting. The Vice President in the firing room at the Launch Control Center, observing the final minutes of the countdown, and he'll watch the launch from here. The countdown has proceeded smoothly since picking up at 11:53 a.m. this morning. Our weather continues to look good as we aim toward a 9:53 p.m. Eastern Standard Time launch. Now T-minus 7 minutes, 37 seconds and counting. This is Kennedy Launch Control.
For launch. Booster, retro, FIDO, guidance, control, telemute, GNC, ECOM, surgeon, procedures, ENCO, FAO, network, Raj, recovery, computer soup. Capcom, you're happy with the voice, right? Okay.
The opening, that's the medium shot. Okay, crayons and Capcom. Hold it, now see when to make your move to the booth. Pan right, pan right, pan right. Zoom out.
This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control, T-minus 5 minutes, 54 seconds and counting. At this time, entering the final phases of the countdown, various elements of the team reporting into Test Supervisor Bill Schick with their go, no-goes for launch. At launch time, a water deluge system at the pad will spray water over the entire area of the pad, some 400,000 gallons of water, more than an average family would use in 3 years, will be spread over the pad and the swing arms, protecting them from the searing flames of the Saturn V first stage. Various elements reporting in now. First stage reporting they are go. Range safety, Superintendent of Range Operations, they are go. Launch Operations Manager reports he is go for launch. Launch Director Walter Caprian has given a go for launch. We passed the 5-minute mark, T-minus 4 minutes, 55 seconds and counting, and swing arm number 9 now coming back to the fully retracted position. The launch escape system sitting atop the spacecraft named America by the crew, now could pull the crew to safety if there were any problems while the vehicle remains on the pad or during the early portions of the flight. At the T-minus 4-minute mark, we'll be standing by for a word from the launch vehicle test conductor, Norm Carlson, giving a clear for launch for the launch vehicle ignition. At T-minus 3 minutes 7 seconds, we'll go on an automatic sequencer. It's called the terminal countdown sequencer. The astronauts on the Astrocom circuit now reporting and thanking the launch team for all their prayers and all their help. T-minus 3 minutes 55 seconds and counting. Apollo 17, the launch team wishes you good luck and Godspeed, reports the Launch Operations Manager over the Astrocom circuit. T-minus 3 minutes 40 seconds, the countdown continuing to go along smoothly. Once we go on the terminal countdown sequencer, the count will be automatic from there on out. The countdown sequencer will initiate the various functions from that time on. However, the men here in the firing room will be monitoring their consoles, watching temperatures, pressures, various readouts. They could override that terminal sequencer if necessary. Moving up now to the time when we'll go on that terminal sequencer, T-minus 3 minutes 10 seconds and counting. Spacecraft ready light has come on, indicating that the spacecraft is ready. We are now on the terminal sequencer. Launch sequence has started. Flowing of that water on the pad will begin at the 1-minute mark. Flowing on the flame deflector below the launch vehicle, on the launch pedestal itself, and along the swing arms, which will be coming back at liftoff. Instrument unit ready light has come on. Emergency detection system ready light is on. All indications are we are go for launch as we approach the 2-minute, 30-second mark. Pressurization of the various propellant tanks now aboard the space vehicle is starting. S2 or second stage liquid oxygen tanks now pressurized. These propellant tanks are pressurized with helium to ensure that during the flight the fuel flows properly down through the engines. It's quiet here in the firing room now as the men are monitoring their consoles, looking at the temperatures, checking pressures and a variety of parameters to ensure everything is in a go condition. Pressurization continuing on the fuel tanks. At this time, we'll go to the critical power transfer at the T-minus 50-second mark in the countdown. At that time, we'll transfer external power source to the flight batteries aboard the space vehicle. The final action by the crew aboard the spacecraft America will be a final guidance alignment. This conducted by the spacecraft commander, Gene Cernan. The flight of Apollo 17 will be able to be seen, depending on weather conditions, some 500 miles away as it goes into Earth orbit. Pressurization continuing. Liquid hydrogen tanks now aboard the second stage have been pressurized. All propellants aboard the second stage now pressurized. A cover aboard the cue ball. This is the cue ball system on top of the launch escape system will be pulled off just shortly before launch. First stage propellant tanks have been pressurized. Now past the 1 minute mark, and we are going on internal power. Now all systems to internal power. We'll be looking for the engine start sequence at the 8.9 second mark in the countdown. The engines will build up to a thrust of 7.6 million pounds. T-minus 30 seconds. We have a cutoff. We have a cutoff at T-minus 30 seconds. We're standing by at T-minus 30 second mark. We'll bring word to you just as soon as we get it. We have a cutoff at T-minus 30 seconds. T-minus 30 seconds and holding. This is Kennedy Launch Control.
Okay. That was a Cape cutoff.
Cape hold.
That's a Alexander, that's a Cape cutoff. That's the automatic sequencer with an automatic cutoff. Jack.
G-ball cover never did go.
Yeah, but that goes about 5 seconds.
Does it? Go ahead, you know everything we do. Okay. Camera 5, give me the boot shot, please. Boot pan.
This Apollo Saturn Launch Control, we're holding at the 30-second mark. This was an automatic cutoff, cut off by the terminal sequencer. As mentioned, this sequencer initiates various actions. Each action must take place and must be completed before the next one can be initiated. If anything does not get completed in time, there will be an automatic cutoff. This cutoff was automatic, done by the sequencer. We're standing by now to check just what the problem was. Now T-minus 30 seconds and holding. This is Kennedy Launch Control. This Apollo Saturn Launch Control, the astronaut crew aboard the spacecraft going through their various safing now, safing of all systems, and the launch team here continuing through their emergency procedures. We'll be standing by to check out the problem just as soon as we can get word. T-minus 30 seconds and holding. This is Kennedy Launch Control.
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. Depends on what it is. Yeah. As he says, yeah.
Spring failed to disconnect, so we can't fix that as a scrub.
Yeah, okay, I think, or else he's either doing that or talking about recycling. It's the first time it's ever happened.
Yeah, I know.
Cut off it. They're going to have to find out what the problem is. They could recycle. See, everything's pressurized. All the tanks, the whole goddamn thing. But you don't get a cutoff for a minor problem. Yeah, go ahead, John. Okay.
This Apollo Saturn Launch Control, the safing procedures continuing at this time. Up to the T-minus 30-second mark, the countdown had been proceeding smoothly. Weather conditions at launch were predicted to be and appeared to be good at that time. However, we had an automatic cutoff from the terminal countdown sequencer, and we're standing by to see just what caused that automatic cutoff. All systems being safed at this time. T-minus 30 seconds, and we are in a hold. This is Kennedy Launch Control.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, come on.
All right. Well, basically, John, I guess we will wait and hear from you on when to release it, right? Hold your shot. Right. Okay. Right. You'll let us know when you call Ziegler, and we'll add 15 minutes to it. Okay. At T-minus 30 seconds. So obviously the computer picked something up we're going to have to see. And they're going to have to return it now. All those tanks are pressurized right now. The whole bird is pressurized for all practical purposes. Because the next event would have been guidance release when you go on internal guidance at 17 seconds. So you got everything completely pressurized out there. It's a dangerous situation. There's no question about it. And they're going to have to, and they recycle, they're going to have to return it to a safe condition. I heard some discussion about the swing arm. I don't know whether it was reference to a problem with the swing arm or whether they were talking about if they recycle, they'd have to bring the swing arm back, obviously. Yeah, okay, that's... okay, yeah, well, all those swing arms are coming... Yeah, see, you have about 3 swing arms left at liftoff, but there's one that should have come back about 30 seconds, if I remember. I'm sure Chuck's got it in his notes. Tell him to check his notes on when those swing arms come back.
This Apollo Saturn launch control. We're continuing in our hold at the 30-second mark while the launch team assesses our problem. The swing arm number 9, will be brought back to its park position, which is 12 degrees back from the space vehicle. Continuing the safing procedures this time and assessing the problem, holding at T-minus 30 seconds. This is Kennedy, launch control.
Here and give them a little event warning, they can be on top of in the same area.
Is there any work you want to do while we're in the hold here? Troubleshooting? Anything that's going to help?
Yeah, I don't know. If I have it.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think what we ought to do is decondition, okay, allow troubleshooting that might be helpful to you guys. We'll probably get about a 10-minute call prior to picking up the test, so I think we'll have time to condition, get back into the launch, so get locked up. I guess we're being pressed about it. We're not pressed for time. I'm sure that we'll go ahead and get this one there and out of there and go on.
This Apollo Saturn launch control. We're continuing our hold at the T-minus 30-second mark as the launch team assesses our problem. At this time, swing arm number 9 is going back to the 12-degree park position. This is in a position about 15 to 20 feet from the spacecraft. All safing procedures have proceeded normally. We're continuing our hold while we assess the problem at T-minus 30 seconds. This is Kennedy Launch Control. This Apollo Saturn launch control, the swing arm number 9 is now back to that retract position at the 12-degree position. Point out that the window we have tonight extends to 1:31 a.m. So we have some time here to assess the problem and then recycle and continue our countdown. We're continuing to hold at the 30-second mark at this time. T-minus 30 seconds and holding. This is Kennedy Launch Control.
seen that other mag and the change.
This is Apollo Saturn launch control. We're at T-minus 30 seconds and continuing our hold. The problem was with the terminal countdown sequencer, which failed to give the command to pressurize the third stage LOX tank. The crew in the firing room, realizing this or seeing this happen, pressurized the tank manually, but this did not happen fast enough to satisfy the automatic sequencer. As was mentioned earlier, during this sequence, everything must happen at a certain time before the next step in the sequence can take place. The next step that was to take place was the retraction of swing arm 9, and at the time that was to take place, the terminal sequencer had not had an indication that the third stage lock tanks had been pressurized. The plan now is to recycle to the T-minus 22-minute mark in the countdown. Now, this recycling procedure will take an additional 35 to 40 minutes. This still puts us well within our launch window. While we're recycling, we'll continue to review the data to determine just what the problem is and whether or not we can proceed from the T-minus 22-minute mark for a launch later in the window. The crew aboard the spacecraft has been alerted to the problem and understand what is happening. They're standing by there at this time. Now, T-minus 30 seconds and holding. This is Kennedy Launch Control. This Apollo Saturn launch control, we're remaining still in the T-minus 30-second mark. We'll remain here for some period. It will take approximately 35 to 40 minutes to recycle back to T-minus 22 minutes, where we'll resume the count. To explain again, what had happened was we were in what was called the terminal countdown sequencer. At 3 minutes, 7 seconds in the countdown, we go on to an automatic system called a terminal countdown sequencer. This countdown sequencer initiates various actions, the final actions in the count. Each of these must occur on schedule and in sequence. Now, what happened at this particular time was the third stage liquid oxygen tank was not automatically pressurized as it should have been. The launch crew here in the firing room, when they saw this, manually pressurized that system, but it was too late to satisfy the sequencer. The next event in the sequence was the retraction of swing arm number 1, swing arm going over to the first stage. And at that time, the sequencer did not see that the tank had been pressurized and sent an automatic cutoff. So we had an automatic cutoff at the 30-second mark. We're standing by at the 30-second mark to go back to T-minus 22 minutes, and we are reevaluating the problem, looking at what caused the sequencer not to automatically pressurize that tank, seeing what that problem is, and seeing if there's a possibility if we go ahead and do this manually early in the sequence, if that will satisfy the sequencer, and we can proceed. Now holding at the T-minus 30-second mark in our countdown, this is Kennedy Launch Control. This Apollo Saturn Launch Control, we're continuing to stand by here at the T-minus 30-second mark in the countdown. The crew remaining perfectly calm in their spacecraft. They've gone through their safing checks. The various safing checks of the launch vehicle have been completed. We're now going through preparations for recycling to the T-minus 22-minute mark. Standing by at this time at T-minus 30 seconds. T-minus 30 seconds and holding in the countdown for Apollo 17. This is Kennedy Launch Control. This Apollo Saturn Launch Control, we're continuing our hold at the 30-second mark. We'll recycle to the T-minus 22-minute mark. The T-minus 22-minute mark is chosen as the recycling point because this is a point where we start the chill down, as was mentioned during that point in the countdown. We start the chill down of the second and third stages to prepare them for the influx of the liquid hydrogen, the cold liquid hydrogen, and the cold liquid oxygen. This chill down has some very specific parameters and must be started at a certain time and cannot go beyond a certain time. So it's best to go back to that point in the countdown under these circumstances and resume our count at the T-minus 22-minute mark when a determination is made that we can resume. Continuing to look at the data here to see exactly what happened. There is no indication of ignition. Ignition was scheduled to come at the 8.9-second mark. Here in the control room, a number of the people were looking through the remote cameras, which have the capability out at the pad of zooming in on specific areas, and a number of people here were looking right at those first stage engines, and there was no indication whatsoever of engine ignition. We're continuing to evaluate all the data at this time as we hold at the T-minus 30-second mark. This is Kennedy Launch Control. This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control, still in our hold at the 30-second mark. While the launch team here is busy recycling to the T-minus 22-minute mark, the mission team out at the Manned Spacecraft Center also pre-planning some of the new times for the mission. They're also this time busily pre-planning the new launch azimuth. The azimuth now, if we go at the next opportunity, would be 81.06 degrees. This will be automatically fed into the instrument unit of the Saturn V vehicle from the Manned Spacecraft Center. All elements of the launch team now putting everything together, checking over data, and doing their best to put us back into a recycle position, ready to pick up the count at the T-minus 22-minute mark. Still evaluating data, however, and we have not at this time been given a go for that resuming of the count. T-minus 30 seconds and holding at this time. This is Kennedy Launch Control. This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control, continuing our hold at the 30-second mark. Back at the Mission Control Center in Houston, the flight controllers returning to their seats now after some consultations. They're back now giving a status check and getting ready in case it is determined that we can pick up the count. In the firing room here, the Apollo Program Director, Rocco Petrone, has moved into the viewing area where the Vice President Spiro Agnew and NASA Administrator James Fletcher are, and he's giving them a briefing and a rundown on our problem. We're standing by at this time. The clock has now been recycled to the T-minus 22-minute mark. However, we have not picked up the count at that mark, but we are now at T-minus 22 minutes and holding. This is Kennedy Launch Control. This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control. We're continuing to stand by at the T-minus 22-minute mark in the countdown. Recycling operations have gone well. We're back at the T-minus 22-minute mark, and it's at this mark which we would pick up the count if we are given a go to resume. Check has been made of the Mission Control Center team. It's Mission Control Center in Houston. All elements of that team reporting that they are ready to resume as soon as they get the word. Now standing by here at Kennedy Space Center while data is reviewed, and determination will be made if and when we can resume our countdown for Apollo 17. Now T-minus 22 minutes and holding. This is Kennedy Launch Control. This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control. We're continuing to stand by at the T-minus 22-minute mark. We're hoping to resume the count shortly. The problem has not been resolved. We're continuing to look into it. However, it has been determined that a resolution one way or the other should be able to be made shortly. So right now we are continuing our recycle procedures, hoping to pick up the count perhaps just minutes from now. If the problem is not resolved by the time we reach the T-minus 8-minute mark, after we continue to count down, the clock will be held again. Right now we're continuing the recycling procedures, hoping to pick up shortly at T-minus 22 minutes. We're now T-minus 22 minutes and holding. This is Kennedy Launch Control. This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control. We're continuing to stand by at the T-minus 22 minute mark. We've been given the word here in the firing room now that the count will be resumed at 11 p.m. at T-minus 22 minutes. At this time, there has still not been a resolution to the problem, but we'll continue looking at that. We could continue on counting down while this problem is looked at. To reiterate what the problem was, the terminal countdown sequencer failed to give the command to pressurize the third stage liquid oxygen tanks. The crews monitoring this function saw that happened and immediately manually pressurized the tanks, but this did not occur in time in the sequence, and when swing arm 1 was to retract, it had not received this signal. As a consequence, an automatic cutoff was sent. There are several possible workarounds to this. They're being looked into at this time, and we plan to resume our countdown at the T-minus 22 minute mark at 11 p.m. Now holding at T-minus 22 minutes, this is Kennedy Launch Control. This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control. We're at T-minus 21 minutes, 10 seconds, and counting. The countdown picked up. The launch team here made a quick check of the various elements, all reporting into the test supervisor, Bill Schick, indicating that they were ready to resume the count. Now counting at T-minus 20 minutes, 53 seconds, and we'll continue to count down here as we look at the problem which caused the hold at the T-minus 30-second mark. Now T-minus 20 minutes, 42 seconds, and counting. This is Kennedy Launch Control. This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control. We're at T-minus 14 minutes, 35 seconds, and counting in our countdown for Apollo 17. Back at the Mission Control Center, the men there are updating the launch azimuth. Launch azimuth standing now at 82.54 degrees. This will automatically be fed into the instrument unit. The swing arm number 9, the access arm to the spacecraft, remains at the 12-degree position. It will remain there until the T-minus 5-minute mark in the countdown. Going on at this time are the cycling of some of the vents for the liquid hydrogen and the liquid oxygen. These are the vents which allow the venting of these gases as there is some boil-off occurring. It's necessary to continue venting these to ensure that they do not freeze in either an open or a closed position. The countdown proceeding smoothly now, T-minus 13 minutes, 43 seconds and counting. This is Kennedy Launch Control.
Alpha. Okay, EDS Auto is on up now. 2 engine out, verify auto. Launch vehicle rates, verify auto. yes, command is off. Release.
This Apollo Saturn Launch Control, we're at T-minus 9 minutes 36 seconds, and we are counting. However, we do plan to continue the hold at the T-minus 8-minute mark. We can hold at that point for 20 minutes and plan a 20-minute hold while the launch crew here satisfies themselves that they have worked out a good solution and a workaround to the problem. The crew has been alerted aboard the spacecraft. Cernan indicated that perhaps they could start a nice conversation about a good book, Thomas Hardy or something like that. Countdown continuing now, aiming toward the 8-minute mark, at which time we'll hold T-minus 9 minutes now. T-minus 9 minutes and counting. This is Kennedy Launch Control.
Understand, Challengers, go for launch. Okay, secondary pump switch is off. Mark it.
This Apollo Saturn Launch Control, we're now holding at the 8-minute mark as planned. The hold at this time is planned for approximately 20 minutes. The crew feels that they have a workaround to the problem, working around the indication going to the terminal sequencer that the tank has not been pressurized when actually it had been done manually. They are checking all of their data, however, to ensure that this is the proper method to work around the problem and that this will result in a smooth countdown from here on. Now T-minus 8 minutes and holding. This is Kennedy Launch Control. This Apollo Saturn Launch Control, we're continuing our hold at the 8-minute mark. The launch operations manager has gone over with the launch team their proposed solution, a workaround. The team appears to be satisfied that it is the proper one. They are now briefing management personnel on the problem and the workaround. Out at the pad, the liquid oxygen continues to vent from the vehicle and is replenished. Liquid hydrogen is also vented from the vehicle as there is some boil off. However, because it is quite a volatile fuel, it's vented to a burn pond at the side of the pad. That burn pond is at the north side of the pad, and there it can be seen burning in a controlled condition at this time. This is a normal condition. Actually, during the day, this burns in such a pure manner that it cannot be seen. However, at night, it is clearly visible. Our countdown continuing to hold at the T-minus 8-minute mark at this time. T-minus 8 minutes and holding. This is Kennedy Launch Control. This Apollo Saturn Launch Control, we're continuing to hold at the T-minus 8-minute mark. Meantime, the crew is getting a variety of updates in the spacecraft, updating them on various aspects and the changes to their mission due to this hold period. Also at the Manned Spacecraft Center, they're continuing to update the flight azimuth as they get new times for the launch. Launch Operations Manager Paul Donnelly just went through quite an extensive briefing with the spacecraft test conductor to pass on to the crew what they feel the problems were and how they plan to work around it. The crew aboard the spacecraft indicated that if the launch team was satisfied with these solutions, they certainly were confident themselves.
We're going to do our best, and we're also
continuing
going to have
our hold at the T-minus 8-minute mark, this is Kennedy Test Control.
thank you for the hardware, the help, and the prayers, and everything else that goes into making a good mission.
This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control. We're continuing in our hold at the T-8-minute mark. At this time, it's been determined to take an additional 20 minutes, add an additional 20 minutes to that planned hold period. The reason for this is the crews would like to take the workaround that they have devised, and at Marshall Space Flight Center, where the Saturn V launch vehicle was developed, they have what is called a breadboard, or a system which is similar to this one, and run through the sequence and ensure that it does operate properly. The crew aboard the spacecraft was informed of this additional 20-minute hold. They indicated that they expected to use all 3 stages of this Saturn V, and they were happy to have the 20-minute hold if that was going to assure that all 3 were going to work properly. Now continuing our hold at the T-8-minute mark, this is Kennedy Launch Control. This is Apollo Saturn Test Control. We're continuing our hold at the T-8-minute mark. The reason the T-8-minute mark is chosen for this hold, as mentioned earlier, has to do with the chill down of the thrust chambers in the S2 or second stage and the third stage. Both of these stages use liquid hydrogen, an extremely cold or cryogenic fuel, and the thrust chamber must be conditioned prior to flight so that it's ready at the time of ignition in flight to receive these fuels coming in. To achieve the proper temperature, the thrust chamber chill down should not exceed 20 minutes, but it must be on for at least 7 minutes and 40 seconds. So rounding that off, the hold was called at the 8-minute mark. We can continuously hold it at this point, whereas if we continued on down, we would have to watch these parameters very closely so that we did not exceed that 20-minute accumulated cooling time. At this point, we can continue our hold, and that continuation can be determined by the problem, and we can pick up then at any time or continue as long as necessary. We're continuing that hold now, T-8 minutes and holding. This is Kennedy Launch Control. This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control. We're continuing in our hold at the T-8-minute mark. Back at the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama, crews there are work on a breadboard or a mock-up of the system in question, where they're putting it through its paces, checking out the workaround solution that is jumping around this erroneous signal, and ensuring that everything works properly. The crew still standing by in the spacecraft, updating various systems there, updating their flight plan, all continuing to go well there. The crew at the Manned Spacecraft Center also doing a considerable amount of updating. They'll be continuing to update the azimuth, and the Launch Control Center here at Kennedy Space Center. The launch team manning their consoles, standing by to pick up the count when we're given the word to go. However, we're standing by still at this time. We have no word from the Marshall Space Flight Center. We're expecting that to come within 10 to 15 minutes from this time. Now T-8 minutes and holding. This is Kennedy Launch Control. This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control. We're continuing in our hold period at this time. Test Supervisor Bill Schick just announced here in the firing room that the hold is expected to last approximately 20 more minutes. Liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen continue to be replenished aboard the 3 stages of the launch vehicle at this time. That replenishing will continue during the hold period and during the final minutes of the countdown. countdown continuing in the hold, T-minus 8 minutes in holding. This is Kennedy Launch Control. This Apollo Saturn Launch Control at 1 minute to midnight. 1 minute to midnight, we're continuing to hold at the T-minus 8 minute mark. Work still going on at the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama. Updating of the tracking, continuing at the Manned Spacecraft Center in Houston. And the launch team here at Kennedy Space Center preparing to pick up the count. Hopefully we'll be given a go-ahead to pick up the count in approximately 10 to 12 minutes from this time. We are continuing to stand by, waiting to hear from the testing going on at the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville. To recap the activities earlier today, the countdown picked up at 11:53 a.m. after a planned hold period, picked up at the T-minus 9 hour mark. Shortly after that time, the pad was cleared, and we began loading the cryogenic fuels, that's the liquid hydrogen and the liquid oxygen, aboard the space vehicle. Those operations actually went a little bit ahead of schedule. The astronaut crew went out to the pad, entered their spacecraft, began checking it out, and those operations also running a little bit ahead of schedule. We went on to our terminal countdown sequencer at the 3 minute 6 second mark as scheduled. Everything seemed to be proceeding fine. At the T-minus 30 second mark, we got an automatic cutoff. It was determined that this cutoff came because pressurization of the liquid oxygen tank aboard the third stage was not initiated automatically as it should have been. When it was done manually, the terminal sequencer did not sense that this had been done and therefore gave the automatic cutoff. We're working the problem right now, continuing to hold at the T-minus 8 minute mark. T-minus 8 minutes and holding. This is Kennedy Launch Control.
Roger, react valves to normal.
This Apollo Saturn Launch Control continuing to hold at the T-minus 8 minute mark. The hold continues to be planned for approximately 5 to 7 more minutes. However, the launch window, should be pointed out tonight, extends to 1:31 a.m. Now, if for any reason we could not make it in that launch window, we could recycle under our present configuration and resume our count, aiming for a 9:53 p.m. Eastern Standard Time launch tonight.
The 5-inch lights went on about 30 seconds ago.
The window for tonight is the same as it was for last night and this morning, 9:53 p.m. to 1:31 a.m. However, the launch team appears to be optimistic with the solution they've found to the problem. They're just waiting for a verification and confirmation from the testing going on at the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama. The time now is 7 minutes after midnight. We're continuing to hold at T-minus 8 minutes. T-minus 8 minutes and holding. This is Kennedy Launch Control.
Okay, CR's PATCOM. And LMP's PR.
This Apollo Saturn Launch Control continuing to hold at the 8 minute mark in the countdown. Still awaiting word from the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama, and the result of the test being run at this time up there. Meanwhile, here in the firing room, all elements of the launch team are assessing their position. They are assessing the effect of the hold and this amount of hold time on each of their systems. Everyone at this time busily at work here in the firing room, also at the Mission Control Center in Houston, busy there with their flight update. Now continuing to hold at the T-minus 8 minute mark. This is Kennedy Launch Control.
You're busy, Skip. Just wondering
Apollo Saturn launch control, we're at 15 minutes past the hour, continuing to hold at the T-minus 8-minute mark. Test supervisor just indicated that we plan to pick up the clock at the T-minus 8-minute mark in 10 minutes, planning to pick up the clock at 25 minutes past the hour. The tests being run at, or have been run now at the Marshall Space Flight Center, and indicate that our system is good the way it has been reconfigured. All elements now during this 10 minutes will be preparing their various systems to pick up the clock at the T-minus 8-minute mark. Meanwhile, out at the Manned Spacecraft Center, the flight controllers there are also planning to pick up the clock. We just received a go from the Superintendent of Range Operations indicating that the range has been cleared around the new flight azimuth. Manned Spacecraft Center, Houston Flight indicates that they are go to pick up the clock at 25 minutes past the hour. Now T-minus 8 minutes and holding. This is Kennedy Launch Control. This Apollo Saturn launch control, we're continuing our hold at the T-minus 8-minute mark. We have approximately 5 more minutes remaining in that hold. It's been determined that the workaround is a correct and satisfactory one. A breadboard or a sample system at the Marshall Space Flight Center was used to run through the entire sequence as it's now configured, and that operated satisfactorily. What happened was during the terminal sequencer, the liquid oxygen tank was not pressurized automatically. When this was done manually, the indication did not get to the sensors in time, so that we had an automatic cutoff.
Yeah, I'll get my pistol out, I guess.
The liquid oxygen tanks aboard the third stage, it's been determined, will be pressurized manually early in the terminal sequence, and jumpers have been installed so that we can then feed the information to the sequencer, so that it will not have an indication that the LOX tanks have not been pressurized. A breadboard situation of this has been constructed at the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, and this has operated satisfactorily. So it's been determined to go ahead with our countdown on this basis. We'll be planning to pick up the count at the T-minus 8-minute mark some 4 minutes from now. Now T-minus 8 minutes and holding. This is Kennedy Launch Control.
Roger, coming back to park.
This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control. We're now resuming the count. T-minus 7 minutes, 54 seconds, and counting. At this time in the spacecraft, updates being given to the spacecraft commander, Eugene Cernan. The swing arm still at the 12-degree position. That's the park position, standing by at the spacecraft. That will be brought back to the full retract position at approximately T-minus 5 minutes in the countdown. The flight director just ran through his team, a status report from his team at the Mission Control Center. That team all reported they are in a go condition. Now T-minus 7 minutes, 20 seconds, and counting. This is Kennedy Launch Control. This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control, T-minus 5 minutes, 40 seconds, and counting. At this time, the various elements of the launch team have been reporting into Bill Schick, the test supervisor, indicating that we are go to continue. Mission Director Chet Lee just verifies that we are go for launch. Safety indicates that we have a go. First stage test conductor, this is the man who has charge of those 5 first stage engines, which will give us the liftoff, has indicated a go for launch. Launch Operations Manager Paul Donnelly also giving us a go for launch. And finally, the launch director, Walter Caprian, says we are go for launch. We've passed the 5-minute mark now, and swing arm number 9. This is the access arm to the spacecraft, is coming back to the full retract position. It moves back alongside the mobile launch tower, and it will remain there now through the final portion of the countdown and the launch. At the T-minus 60-second mark, 20 nozzles will start flame deflector deluge of 13,000 gallons per minute of water pouring down on that flame deflector. So a great deal of what is seen at launch time, which looks like smoke, is actually steam as this water is burned off. This water to cool the pad area and to cool the equipment alongside of the launch tower, as the water also pours across the swing arms on the launch tower. We're approaching the 4-minute mark in the countdown now. T-minus 4 minutes, 5 seconds, and continuing to count. At the 4-minute mark, we'll stand by for a final go from Norm Carlson, the launch vehicle test conductor. He's given a go. The launch operations manager now switching over to the Astrocom circuit. This is the circuit that the astronauts, the launch operations manager, and the spacecraft communicator will remain on. They have this private circuit to keep extraneous talk off of their circuit. They are checking in. They are checking in now on the Astrocom circuit, indicating that they are go. Spacecraft has indicated they are ready. Instrument unit ready light has come on. S1C, that's the first stage. Preparations are now complete as we approach the 3-minute mark. There's quiet in the firing room now as the engineers and technicians are monitoring their consoles. They're monitoring the various rates, pressures, temperatures. They can override the terminal sequencer if they cite a problem that it has not picked up. We are on that terminal sequencer now. We've passed the 3-minute mark, T-minus 2 minutes, 47 seconds, and counting as we are on the terminal sequencer. At the T-minus 50-second mark, we'll be looking for that critical power transfer. This is where we transfer from the external power source, which has been feeding the 3 stages of the launch vehicle, to internal power. That's to the flight batteries aboard the space vehicle. It's expected that given proper weather conditions, people will be observing this flight from as much as 500 miles away. This includes a large portion of the southeastern United States, the northern tip of Cuba, and the Bahama Islands. Now approaching the 2-minute mark. T-minus 2 minutes and counting, and the countdown continues to move along smoothly. Now in the terminal countdown portion. The automatic sequencer has stopped the replenishing of the liquid oxygen and the liquid hydrogen. We're standing by now to begin pressurization of the fuel tanks. The 2nd stage fuel tank pressurized, 3rd stage fuel tank pressurized. The countdown continuing to move along smoothly. T-minus 90 seconds. T-minus 90 seconds. Countdown continuing smoothly. S4B propellants pressurized. The indication now using the workaround showing the S4B propellants have been pressurized. Now looking at the liquid hydrogen tanks as they become pressurized. LH2 aboard the 2nd stage pressurized. All propellants now aboard the 2nd stage pressurized as we approach the 1-minute mark in the countdown. Mark T-minus 1 minute and counting now in the final minute of the countdown. At T-minus 45 seconds, Gene Cernan will make the final guidance alignment. This is the mark. T-minus 5:45, and Gene Cernan made that final guidance alignment. That's the last action taken by the crew aboard the space vehicle. Now approaching the half-minute mark. T-minus 33, T-minus 30 seconds, and continuing on now. Continuing on at T-minus 26-second mark, T-minus 25. We'll get a final guidance release at the T-minus 17-second mark. T-minus 17, final guidance release. We'll expect engine ignition at 8.9 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, ignition sequence started. All engines are started. We have ignition, 2, 1, 0. We have a liftoff.